Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I want to start today by asking you to just look at the calendar for a second.
Okay.
Usually we see a date as, well, it's just a box on a grid, right? It's a container for appointments, birthdays.
Maybe a holiday if you're lucky, yeah.
Exactly. But we've been looking at this stack of research around one specific date, February 7th. And it feels less like a box and, I don't know, more like a core sample.
That is a great way to put a core sample. Because when you drill down into this one date across the 20th century, you don't find random events.
Not at all.
You find a narrative, a very specific, very intense narrative about the Black experience in the Americas.
It's almost eerie. We're calling this deep dive the Unbroken Chain. We have 4 pretty distinct stops on this timeline.
Right.
We've got Mississippi in 1904, then Chicago in 1926, Haiti in the 80s and 90s, and finally the Bronx in the year 2000.
And the mission today isn't just to, list what happened. It's to understand how these events are actually talking to each other across time.
Exactly. We're sort of moving from this moment of absolute racial terror to intellectual resistance, then a kind of political revolution, and ending with cultural assertion.
It's a map. It's almost a perfect map of the journey from repression to finding a voice.
But we have to start at the bottom. The what we're calling the root wound. February 7th, 1904, Doddsville, Mississippi.
Yeah.
And I should warn everyone listening, the details here they're heavy. We're talking about the lynching of Luther Holbert, an unidentified Black woman.
It is heavy, but it's such necessary context. You can't understand the resistance that comes later without understanding the specific kind of terror that was being resisted.
So the accounts of this are just staggering. Holbert was accused of killing a white plantation owner, a man named James Eastland. But when you look at the background, this wasn't some random crime.
No, not at all. This really stemmed from a dispute over what was basically slavery by another name.
Debt peonage.
Debt peonage. That's the mechanism. After Reconstruction, the South couldn't legally use enslaved labor, so they used debt. You work the land, you owe the owner for tools, for food, and somehow the math. It just never works out for you.
You can never leave.
You can never leave. You're always in debt. And Holbert was reportedly trying to help others get out of that system.
So it's a labor dispute that just spirals into violence.
Right.
A shootout happens, Eastland is killed, and then a mob forms. But what really struck me in the research wasn't just the violence itself, it was the atmosphere. This wasn't some spontaneous burst of rage. It was festive.
That is the most chilling part. There were 1,000 people there.
1,000?
We have reports of people eating deviled eggs and drinking lemonade and whiskey. They brought their children. It was a Sunday afternoon picnic centered around torturing 2 human beings.
I can't even get my head around that image.
Yeah.
Devil A's and lemonade while people are being tortured with corkscrews.
Large corkscrews used on their flesh. Fingers and ears were cut off as souvenirs. The brutality was performative. The point wasn't just to kill them.
No.
The point was to send a message to every other Black person in the Mississippi Delta. You have no body. You have no rights. We can do this to you while we eat lunch.
It's total erasure. But here's where the history gets. I mean, really complicated. We mentioned the plantation owner who was killed, James Eastland.
Right.
He had a son, also named James Eastland. And this kid, he grows up in the shadow of this event, but he doesn't retreat from it. He doubles down. He becomes a U.S. senator.
And one of the most powerful senators of the 20th century, this is where you have to connect the dots between mob violence and state power.
Yeah.
James Eastland, the son, he becomes the literal gatekeeper of the civil rights era. He chaired the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Which, for anyone who doesn't follow Senate procedure, that's a huge deal. The Judiciary Committee is where bills go to die.
And he bragged about it. He claimed to have killed over 100 civil rights bills. He used the filibuster. He used committee rules. He took the raw physical dominance of that lynch mob from 1904
and just put it in a suit
and translated it into bureaucratic procedure in the 1960s. He famously called African Americans an inferior race. The violence didn't vanish, it just went to Washington.
Okay, so that is the baseline. That is the terror. Now, keep that image in your mind, the corkscrews, the senator, the erasure. Because we're jumping forward exactly 22 years, February 7th, 1926.
The pivot.
This is the day Carter G. Woodson launches Negro History Week.
Which, of course, creates the bridge to what we all now know as Black History Month.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate for a second because this comes up every single year.
Yeah.
People ask, why February? It's the shortest month. It can feel like a consolation prize. Was Woodson just getting the leftovers?
It's a common critique, but historically, it's just not accurate. Woodson wasn't given February, he took it. And he took it for a really strategic reason. He was looking at traditions that were already happening in the Black community. People were already celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday on the 12th and Frederick Douglass's on the 14th.
So he was basically building a structure around something that was already happening organically.
Precisely. He didn't want to force a new holiday on people. He wanted to expand one they already had. But more importantly, you have to look at why he thought history was the cure. Remember, in 1904,
Hard to forget.
Woodson's entire philosophy was a direct response to that mindset. He has this really famous quote, "Lynching starts in the schoolroom."
Lynching starts in the schoolroom. Wow. That's a powerful statement.
It is. He's saying that the physical violence, the rope, the fire, that's only the final step. The first step is intellectual. If you teach a child that Black people have no history, no civilization, no value, then treating them like animals later isn't a crime. It's it's logical within that warped worldview.
So Negro History Week wasn't just about, pride. It was the defense mechanism.
It was an inoculation. Woodson believed that if you could change the software, the narrative in the mind, you could eventually stop the hardware, the violence of the state. He was trying to disprove the lie that justified the lynching.
It's really interesting to think of history as a weapon in that way, not just a collection of facts, but a shield.
A shield and a sword. By 1926, you have this intellectual resistance taking root, and it grows. I mean, by the 40s, it's expanding to a month in some places, like West Virginia. By 1976, the federal government makes it official.
But the root is that friction. 1904 tries to erase the body. 1926 tries to reclaim the mind.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the terror and the defense. Now the chain. It stretches across the ocean. We're going to the Caribbean, to Haiti.
The first Black Republic.
And the date February 7th shows up here with this incredible consistency. Happens twice, involving the same struggle for power. Let's start with February 7th, 1986.
The fall of the House of Duvalier.
This is Baby Doc Duvalier. His family had run Haiti like a personal business for almost 30 years. And just like in Mississippi, they had their own enforcement squads.
The Turntables. They were a paramilitary force that operated very much like the lynch mobs, but with state sanction. They disappeared people, they tortured people. It was a complete reign of terror. But by 86, the Haitian people had launched this huge uprising called the Déchoucage, the uprooting.
And on February 7th, Baby Doc flees. He gets on a U.S. Air Force plane and heads to France. Now, reading through the diplomatic cables from this time, the U.S. role here feels, ambivalent.
Oh, very.
They helped him leave, but they weren't exactly cheering for a people's revolution.
No, and this is where we have to talk about something called preventative diplomacy.
Preventative diplomacy. That sounds like a euphemism.
It absolutely is. I mean, look at the context. It's the Cold War. The U.S. is terrified of another Cuba right on its doorstep.
Right.
So they see the Haitian people rising up, and they worry that if the pot boils over completely, you get a radical, maybe communist-leaning government. So they pressured Duvalier to leave. Not to liberate the people, but to let some steam out of the pot.
To control the outcome.
To control the outcome. They wanted stability, not necessarily real democracy.
So they basically cut the head off the regime, but they wanted to leave the body intact.
That was the plan. The goal was to transition to what some scholars call polyarchy, or low-intensity democracy.
Okay, low-intensity democracy. That just sounds incredibly cynical. Is that just a fake democracy?
It's not fake exactly, but it's definitely leashed. In a polyarchy, you have elections, people can vote, but the real centers of power, the military, the business elite, the relationship with foreign money, all that stays off limits to the voters.
So the elites just circulate power among themselves.
And the people get to choose which one of them rules for a few years. It's democracy without any real economic change.
Right. Which brings us to the next link in the chain, February 7, 1991. Exactly 5 years later.
To the day.
The inauguration of Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was definitely not part of the elite plan.
Not even close. He was a parish priest, a proponent of liberation theology, which basically says the church should be primarily concerned with freeing the poor.
He won in a landslide. Something like 67% of the vote.
An absolute landslide. The movement was called Lavalas.
The flood.
The flood. The idea was to just wash the country clean of all the old corruption, the old Makut system. And when Aristide took office on February 7, 1991, that was the moment those schoolroom lessons from Woodson were applied to the government palace.
The people rejected the narrative.
They rejected the story that they were only fit to be ruled by dictators. But because he wasn't the safe candidate, because he wasn't low intensity, the backlash was immediate.
Fierce.
He wanted to raise the minimum wage, tax the wealthy, reform the military. The elites in the international community just panicked. He was overthrown in a bloody coup only 7 months later.
But that date, February 7th, it still stands as this kind of high water mark.
It represents the possibility. On that day, the descendants of the enslaved stood in the presidential palace and said, "We are the state." Even if it was brief, it broke that chain of command that started with the whip.
So we've gone from a plantation in Mississippi to the palace in Port-au-Prince. We have one more stop, and this one feels different. It's not political in the same way. It's cultural.
February 7, 2000, the Bronx, New York.
The death of Christopher Rios, better known to the world as Big Pun.
A legend. The first Latino solo rapper to go platinum.
Now, some listeners might be thinking, okay, we were talking about lynchings and revolutions.
Yeah.
How does a rapper fit into this chain?
It's a fair question, but if you look at the trajectory we've been following, it makes perfect sense. Big Pun was Puerto Rican, but he came up in the Bronx, which is this incredible melting pot of the African diaspora. And hip-hop is the cultural result of that mixing.
It's the voice.
It is the voice. Think back to 1904. The goal of that lynching was silence, erasure. Then think to 1926. The goal was just to get the history into the books. By 2000, you have Big Pun, a man from the margins, someone who would have been completely voiceless in 1904, holding a microphone and broadcasting his story to millions of people.
He commanded the narrative in a way Woodson could only have dreamed of.
He absolutely did. But there's a tragedy here that I think links right back to the beginning. Pun died of a heart attack and respiratory failure. He was 28 years old.
And he weighed nearly 700 pounds.
Yeah. And it brings up the issue of the black and brown body all over again. It does. In 1904, the threat to the body was external, the mob, the rope. In 2000, even with the money, even with the platinum plaques, the threat becomes internal. It's a legacy of poverty, of food deserts, of the incredible stress of trying to make it out of that environment.
It's a health gap.
The health gap. You can gain a voice, you can gain political power, but the physical toll of that struggle, it still manifests. The body keeps the score. Pun's death is this tragic reminder that cultural victory doesn't automatically fix the systemic issues that destroy your health.
That is a sobering thought. So when we step back and we look at this whole unbroken chain of February 7th, let's just quickly recap the journey.
We start in 1904 with the wound, the spectacle of terror in Mississippi.
Then we move to 1926 with the cure, the intellectual defense of Black history.
We go to 1986 and 1991 with the power, the fight for democracy in Haiti.
And we end in 2000 with the voice, the cultural triumph and the physical tragedy of Big Pun.
It really reframes how you look at history. It's not just a list of things that happen.
It's a relay race.
It is a relay race.
Yeah.
And the baton is heavy. What I love about this vertical history approach is it forces you to see the connections. You see that the logic of the lynch mob in Mississippi is the same logic that the Haitian elite used to justify the coup against Aristide.
And the logic of Woodson's history class is the same logic that fueled Big Pun's lyrics. It's all one long argument.
It is an argument about humanity.
So to bring this back to everyone listening today, why does this matter now? I mean, aside from being a fascinating coincidence.
I think it matters because we are still living inside the echoes of all these dates. We are still debating whose history gets taught in schools. That's the 1926 fight right now. We are still debating who gets to vote and how much that vote actually counts. That's the Haiti fight. And we're still dealing with massive health disparities in marginalized communities. That's the 2000 fight.
The calendar changes, but the work remains.
Exactly. And I think Woodson gives us the key. If the oppression starts with a story of inferiority, then the liberation has to start with a story too, a truer story.
And finding that story requires looking a little deeper at the dates we usually just fly past on the calendar.
It requires noticing the chain, and once you see it, you really can't unsee it.
Well, we hope this dive has helped you see February 7th a little differently. Maybe take a look at today's date, whatever it is when you're listening, and see what change you can find.
There's always a pattern there if you look hard enough.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you on the next date.